Hey there, creepy peeps. Welcome to my channel. If you are new here, welcome back. If you are returning, the horror community loves 80s horror movies, so it's time for me to exploit that for views. Really quick before we get into my favorite 80s horror movies, I feel like I need to give a little bit of a disclaimer just based on some of the comments I was getting on my top 10 favorite 70s horror movie video. My rating system is basically non-existent. I fully realize it doesn't make a lot of sense. So when you see like my ratings at the end of a movie review or on Letterboxd, I try to inject a little bit of technical aspects into that. So, you know, I could watch a movie that I think is just a great piece of filmmaking. I give it a 4, a 4.5, or a 5, but it's not necessarily something that I would watch for enjoyment over and over again. Hopefully that makes sense and you can relate to that in some way. So like the 70s list I did, this list is pure enjoyment only. So if insert popular 80s horror movie isn't on this list, it doesn't mean that I think it's a bad movie. It's just not my favorite to watch for enjoyment. Does that make sense? Without further ado, let's get into it. Number 10 on my list is Fright Night. I love the whole like neighbor might be something scary or sinister trope. I feel like that's pretty common in a lot of movies, like coming of age movies and books. There's just something fun and kind of endearing about it, I think, because it's normally some sort of like coming of age story. The humor in this movie really does it for me also. I feel like this is just a really well-balanced horror movie. It's got laughs, some sexy as hell shots of Chris Sarandon, and of course, frights. Not to mention a healthy dose of cool practical effects, and the cheesy theme song is just the cherry on top, really. Number 9 on my list is Creepshow. Of course, I feel like that's no surprise at this point because everyone knows by now that I love anthologies. I just think horror anthologies are so much fun, and Creepshow is like the pinnacle of fun horror anthologies for me. The segments are the perfect length, they're not too long, not too short, and the wraparound perfectly ties everything together. It might sound weird, but Creepshow kind of gives me like this warm blanket feeling. Almost comforting in a nostalgic way, almost as if like Creepshow comics were a real thing and I used to read them as a kid, but that's obviously not the case, but that's just the feeling I get. Does that make sense? Number 8 for me is An American Werewolf in London, which to me is pretty much just the quintessential werewolf movie, and I feel like a lot of you guys might agree with me on that one. The characters are super endearing and likable, which is a really important detail for me. The practical effects, come on. Bar none, I don't really have to tell you guys, but that transformation sequence is amazing and would definitely be near the top of my list were I to do a favorite practical effect movie moments list. Maybe this will surprise some of you, but number 7 on my list is actually an Italian horror movie. What? I know. Phenomena. There's a lot of things about this movie that are weirdly similar to Suspiria, which I guess kind of makes sense because they're both directed by the same person. I just find the fact that Jennifer Connelly has insect telepathy to be iconic as fuck. And I don't even like bugs, so the fact that I think that's iconic should speak volumes. Number 6 on my list, however, will surprise nobody. It's A Nightmare on Elm Street from my man, Wes Craven. And with this, I've already reached the point in the list where I feel like I don't really have to justify my choices. You guys will just understand as soon as you hear what the movies are. But whatever, really quick, this remains my favorite of the big 3 slasher franchises. It's fun, it's funny, and it doesn't go on for too long. Nor do the sequels go off the rails and create their own separate storylines. Moving on with more movies that I don't need to justify, number 5 for me is The Thing. For one, the practical effects, we all know how iconic they are. And I also really love the ominous and unresolved ending. I feel like that ending gives this movie like a huge rewatchability factor. I like it because not every movie needs to be like wrapped up neatly in a bow and just everything resolved. Definitely not the case in this movie, but because of certain things that aren't resolved at the end of that movie, I'm trying to speak vague in case somebody hasn't seen it, which is totally fine. Because everything is so unresolved at the end of that movie, it leaves a lot up to your interpretation, which for me makes rewatching this movie a lot of fun. Let's just ignore the shade I low-key threw at the franchise a second ago, because number 4 on my list is actually Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. I don't include this movie in the shade that I previously threw about the crazy storylines of this franchise, because this is the only movie in the Halloween franchise that doesn't include Michael Myers. And I totally vibe with what this franchise could have been, which is an anthology series, which I think pretty much everyone knows at this point. That was one of John Carpenter's initial ideas for the franchise, just have a whole series of movies that are under the umbrella of a Halloween franchise, but they're all different stories that just happen to take place around that time of year. And honestly, I really wish that were the case, because big unpopular opinion warning, I don't like Michael Myers that much. Love him in the original, iconic, but there is a sharp drop off for me starting with the very first sequel. I totally get why everybody likes him, that's great. It's just, I'm a little bit over it. So let's move on with my number 3 pick before everybody unsubscribes. Number 3 for me is actually Creepshow 2. I know, is that an unpopular opinion? I'm not really sure. I love the second Creepshow. It's, to me, just as fun as the first. Of course, still gives me that like warm, fuzzy, kind of nostalgic feeling, even though it came out before I was born. But I just like the segments a little bit more in this one. I mean, if I were ranking all of the Creepshow segments between these two movies, Old Chief Woodenhead and The Raft are in the 1 and 2 spot. Like, they're my favorite segments between these two movies. Number 2 on my list is Beetlejuice. I know it's not a full horror movie, but I feel like I can't talk about 80s movies without talking about Beetlejuice. I don't need to explain this one. I've talked about how much I love this movie at length. You get it. This movie just makes me so happy. That's why it's here. And finally, number 1 on my list, this should not be a surprise to anybody if you watched the tour of my DVD collection, or if you follow me on Letterboxd, because it's right there on my profile page. It's The Evil Dead. Hopefully that kind of earns me some points back after dissing Halloween so much. Bruce Campbell is bae, and this movie is just full of everything that makes 80s horror movies so much fun to watch. Teenagers being dumb, awesome and gruesome practical effects, lots of blood, and cheesy, corny goodness out the ass. It's perfect mindless fun, and it's just plain enjoyable to watch. So if anybody is still left watching this video, let me know in the comment section down below what your top favorite 80s horror movies are. Really quick, I want to thank my creepy patron peeps for their support of my channel. Thank you guys so much. If you want to find out the perks to being a creepy patron peep yourself, you can follow that link in the description. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. If you're new here or if you've been lurking, subscribe. Become a creepy peep today. I post videos Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Thank you for listening to me talk. I will talk to you guys very, very soon. Until then, though, stay strange. Bye.